Welcome to Strides to Solutions. I'm Esther Adams, and today we're confronting one of the most pressing challenges facing young people with ADHD, the relationship between screen time and symptom severity. What we're going to explore isn't another debate about whether technology is good or bad. It's about understanding how digital media fundamentally interacts with ADHD neurobiology in ways that can either support or undermine developing brains. The research we're examining today comes from large scale longitudinal studies, genetic analyses, and clinical trials that paint a clear picture. For youth with ADHD, the digital environment isn't neutral territory. It's a landscape that can either amplify existing challenges or, when used strategically, support healthy development. The evidence we'll discuss today reveals something crucial. Not all screen time affects ADHD brains the same way. The content, context, duration, and timing of digital engagement create vastly different neurological and behavioral outcomes. Understanding these differences isn't just academic curiosity, it's essential for helping young people with ADHD navigate a world where digital engagement is inevitable. Multiple longitudinal studies tracking thousands of children over years have found a consistent, dose dependent relationship between recreational screen use and ADHD symptom severity. The more time young people spend on gaming, social media, and entertainment media, the more pronounced their inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity become. This relationship holds across age groups, genders, and socioeconomic backgrounds, suggesting it's a fundamental neurobiological phenomenon rather than a cultural or social artifact. This isn't correlation masquerading as causation. Mendelian randomization studies, which use genetic variants as natural experiments, suggest that screen time genuinely causes increases in ADHD symptoms rather than ADHD, simply leading to more screen use. These studies examine genetic variations that influence screen time behavior and track whether those variations also predict ADHD symptoms. The fact that genetic predispositions to higher screen use predict worse ADHD outcomes provides strong evidence for causality. The mechanism appears to center on impulsivity as the key mediator. This is one of the most important findings from recent research. Increased recreational screen time specifically drives impulsivity, which then cascades into worsening attention and hyperactivity. This creates a domino effect where screen exposure doesn't directly impair attention, but rather undermines impulse control, which then makes it harder to sustain attention and regulate behavior. This makes neurological sense when we consider how ADHD brains process reward and stimulation. The immediate variable rewards provided by games and social media can hijack reward systems that are already dysregulated in ADHD, but the impulsivity pathway reveals why this happens. Screen based activities that provide rapid, unpredictable rewards train the brain to expect immediate gratification, making it harder to tolerate the delays and sustained effort required for focused attention. Understanding impulsivity as the mediator also explains why different types of screen content have such different effects. Activities that require waiting, planning, or sustained effort can actually support impulse control development, while those that provide constant stimulation and immediate rewards can undermine it. The type of content matters enormously, and the research reveals specific patterns that every parent and educator should understand. Fast paced, highly stimulating, or violent content appears to be particularly problematic for ADHD symptoms. These formats can overstimulate nervous systems that already struggle with arousal regulation, leading to increased hyperactivity and decrease to focus on less stimulating tasks. The fast paced nature of much digital content creates what researchers call attentional residue. The brain becomes habituated to rapid scene changes, quick cuts, and constant stimulation. When young people with ADHD consume this type of content regularly, their nervous systems become calibrated to expect this level of stimulation. Real world activities like homework, conversations, or reading can feel unbearably slow and understimulating by comparison. Violent content adds another layer of complexity. Beyond the obvious concerns about aggression, violent media appears to increase physiological arousal and stress responses in ways that are particularly problematic for ADHD. The research shows that exposure to violent content can increase cortisol levels and sympathetic nervous system activation, both of which can worsen attention and impulse control problems. This creates a vicious cycle. Young people with ADHD may gravitate toward more stimulating content because their under-aroused nervous systems crave intensity. However, regular exposure to this content can further dysregulate their arousal systems, making it even harder to find satisfaction in less stimulating activities. Meanwhile, educational or interactive content shows little or no association with symptom worsening. Screen time used for learning, creativity, or structured problem solving doesn't carry the same risks as passive entertainment consumption. This distinction is crucial because it suggests that the medium itself isn't the problem, it's how the medium is being used. Educational content typically requires more active engagement, sustained attention, and often some degree of effort or challenge. These activities can actually exercise the same cognitive muscles that are impaired in ADHD: working memory, sustained attention, and cognitive flexibility. When screen time involves problem solving, learning new skills, or creating content, it can support rather than undermine cognitive development. Interactive content also tends to provide more predictable reward structures. Educational games or learning platforms typically reward effort and progress rather than providing random, variable rewards. This can help young people with ADHD develop tolerance for delayed gratification and associate effort with positive outcomes. The research reveals something particularly concerning about social media use in young people with ADHD. These platforms seem to create a perfect storm of vulnerability that goes far beyond simple screen time concerns. Youth with ADHD already experience higher rates of peer rejection and social difficulties, making them particularly drawn to online social connections where they might feel more accepted or understood. However, their emotional dysregulation and rejection sensitivity also make them more vulnerable to negative online experiences. The research shows that young people with ADHD are more likely to interpret ambiguous online interactions negatively, feeding into cycles of rejection, sensitivity, and emotional distress. A delayed response to a message, a post that doesn't receive expected likes, or exclusion from online group conversations can trigger intense emotional reactions. Social media platforms are designed to capture and hold attention through variable reward schedules, the same psychological mechanisms that make gambling addictive. For ADHD brains that already struggle with impulse control and reward sensitivity, these platforms can become particularly compelling and difficult to disengage from. The unpredictable nature of social feedback, never knowing when a post will receive likes or comments, creates a psychological hook that's especially powerful for brains wired for immediate gratification. The emotional impact extends beyond immediate platform use. Young people with ADHD report using more maladaptive emotional regulation strategies when engaged with social media: more rumination, catastrophizing, and self blame. Instead of processing difficult emotions through healthy strategies like problem solving or seeking support, they may get trapped in cycles of negative thinking that social media seems to amplify. This happens partly because social media provides a constant stream of social comparison opportunities. Young people with ADHD, who often struggle with self esteem and academic performance, may find themselves comparing their internal experiences to others' carefully curated online presentations. The resulting feelings of inadequacy can worsen the emotional dysregulation that's already challenging in ADHD. Gaming presents a different but equally complex picture. The research shows that problematic gaming use is strongly associated with ADHD symptom severity, but the relationship isn't straightforward. Many young people with ADHD find gaming deeply engaging and satisfying in ways that other activities aren't. The immediate feedback, clear goals, and controllable environment can provide a sense of competence and flow that's often missing from their daily experience. Gaming can offer what psychologists call optimal experience, a state of complete engagement where skills match challenges and feedback is immediate and clear. For young people with ADHD who often struggle with academic tasks that feel overwhelming or social situations that feel unpredictable, games can provide a rare experience of mastery and control. However, this engagement becomes problematic when it creates what researchers call a displacement effect, when gaming time crowds out other essential activities. The research consistently shows that when gaming interferes with sleep, social relationships, academic performance, or physical activity, ADHD symptoms worsen significantly. The challenge is that the same features that make gaming appealing to ADHD brains, immediate rewards, clear goals, constant stimulation, can also make it difficult to transition to other activities. The contrast between the highly engineered reward systems of games and the more ambiguous, delayed rewards of real world activities can make everything else feel boring or frustrating by comparison. The research suggests that short bursts of screen based engagement might temporarily enhance reward sensitivity in youth with ADHD, potentially providing benefits. Brief gaming sessions or structured digital activities might help satisfy the ADHD brain's need for stimulation and immediate reward. When someone with ADHD engages with rewarding screen content for 15 to 20 minutes, it can actually improve their mood and arousal level in ways that support better functioning afterward. However, prolonged sessions consistently lead to increased hyperactivity and inattention, creating a pattern where initial benefits give way to symptom exacerbation. The research shows that sessions longer than 30 to 60 minutes typically produce negative effects, with the problems becoming more pronounced as duration increases. This creates a challenging dynamic for families. The same activity that might provide short term benefits and genuine enjoyment can become problematic when extended beyond certain thresholds. Understanding these patterns requires careful observation of individual responses and often trial and error to find the sweet spot between beneficial engagement and symptom worsening. The timing of screen use proves to be as important as duration. Research consistently shows that evening screen exposure, particularly from smartphones and tablets, disrupts sleep patterns in ways that are especially problematic for ADHD. Sleep problems and ADHD symptoms have a bidirectional relationship. Poor sleep worsens ADHD symptoms, and ADHD symptoms make it harder to maintain healthy sleep patterns. When screen time interferes with sleep, it creates a cascade of difficulties that extends far beyond tiredness. Poor sleep quality affects emotional regulation, impulse control, and attention, the very areas where young people with ADHD already struggle. The blue light exposure from screens can delay melatonin production, making it harder to fall asleep at appropriate times. But the sleep disruption isn't just about light exposure. The cognitive and emotional stimulation from engaging content can keep minds active and aroused when they should be winding down. Social media interactions, competitive gaming, or consuming exciting content close to bedtime can leave young brains in a state of activation that's incompatible with restful sleep. The reciprocal relationship between ADHD and problematic screen use represents one of the most concerning findings in recent research. While screen time can worsen ADHD symptoms, young people with ADHD are also more vulnerable to developing problematic relationships with digital media. This creates a vicious cycle where those most at risk for negative effects are also most likely to engage in problematic use patterns. Several factors contribute to this vulnerability. Young people with ADHD often have fewer social connections and may turn to online relationships to meet their social needs. Their difficulties with emotional regulation can make them more likely to use screens as a coping mechanism for difficult feelings. Their challenges with time management and impulse control can make it harder to maintain boundaries around screen use. The reward sensitivity differences in ADHD brains also play a role. The immediate variable rewards provided by digital media can be particularly compelling for brains that struggle to find motivation for less immediately rewarding activities like homework or chores. This can lead to a pattern where screen activities become the primary source of positive reinforcement in a young person's life. Understanding family dynamics becomes crucial when addressing these challenges. The research on parental mediation reveals important strategies for managing screen time effectively, but also shows that implementation matters enormously. Setting clear screen time limits consistently reduces problematic use and improves ADHD outcomes, but the effectiveness of these limits depends greatly on how they're implemented and the overall family environment. Restrictive mediation, setting and enforcing clear boundaries, shows the strongest evidence for reducing harmful effects. However, this works best when combined with active engagement rather than punitive enforcement. Families that approach screen time limits as collaborative problem solving rather than authoritarian control tend to see better outcomes. Co-viewing activities and content discussions can help young people develop better digital literacy and self-regulation skills. When parents engage with their children's digital interests rather than simply restricting them, they can help guide more positive choices and build awareness of how different types of content affect mood and behavior. The family environment matters enormously. High family conflict or inconsistent parental approaches can undermine the benefits of screen time management. When screen time becomes a constant source of conflict, it can increase stress and emotional dysregulation in ways that worsen ADHD symptoms regardless of actual usage patterns. Conversely, positive family relationships and consistent parental involvement enhance the effectiveness of any intervention strategy. Families that maintain strong relationships while implementing reasonable boundaries tend to see the best outcomes in terms of both screen time management and overall ADHD symptom management. Parental role modeling also plays a crucial role that's often overlooked. Young people with ADHD often struggle with executive function skills like planning and self monitoring. When parents model healthy digital habits and provide external structure, it supports the development of these skills. However, when parents themselves struggle with problematic screen use, it can undermine their credibility and effectiveness in setting boundaries. The research comparing different intervention approaches reveals some surprising findings about what works best. While limiting screen time shows benefits, comprehensive sleep hygiene interventions appear to be more effective than screen time restrictions alone. Establishing consistent bedtime routines, reducing evening light exposure, and creating sleep conducive environments produce stronger improvements in attention and emotional regulation than simply reducing overall screen time. This suggests that the timing and context of screen use may be more important than total duration. Strategic management, avoiding screens close to bedtime, ensuring adequate sleep, and maintaining other healthy activities might be more beneficial than strict time limits alone. The research shows that families who focus on sleep hygiene while maintaining reasonable screen boundaries often see better outcomes than those who focus primarily on screen time restrictions. The sleep connection reveals why evening screen use is particularly problematic. Beyond the direct effects of blue light on melatonin production, engaging digital content close to bedtime can increase cognitive and emotional arousal in ways that interfere with the natural wind down process that healthy sleep requires. Physical activity emerges as perhaps the most powerful counterbalance to problematic screen use. The research consistently shows that regular physical activity produces moderate to large improvements in ADHD symptoms, with benefits that often exceed those of screen based interventions. Aerobic exercise, martial arts, and yoga all show significant benefits for attention, impulse control, and emotional regulation. The contrast with passive screen activities is stark and important to understand. While physical activity strengthens the very brain networks that ADHD affects, improving executive function, emotional regulation, and attention, passive screen consumption can weaken these same systems. Physical activity increases production of brain derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, which supports neuroplasticity and cognitive function. It also promotes the development of prefrontal cortex areas that are often delayed in their maturation in ADHD. Even short bursts of physical activity can provide immediate improvements in attention and mood. A 20-minute walk or brief exercise session can enhance focus and emotional regulation in ways that support better digital engagement when screen time does occur. This creates an opportunity for families to use physical activity strategically, incorporating movement breaks before homework or using brief exercise sessions to help children transition away from screen time. The research shows that both open skill activities, like sports that require adapting to changing conditions, and closed skill activities, like running or martial arts forms, provide benefits, but open skill activities may be especially helpful for executive function and cognitive flexibility. These activities require constant attention, decision making, and adaptation, exactly the cognitive skills that are impaired in ADHD. Mindfulness and meditation practices also show promise as interventions that can help young people with ADHD develop better self regulation around technology use. Meta analyses reveal moderate to large effects of mindfulness training on inattention and impulsivity, with effect sizes ranging from negative 0.26 to negative 0.83 for inattention and negative 0.19 to negative 0.68 for impulsivity and hyperactivity. These practices help develop the present moment awareness and impulse control that can support healthier digital choices. Mindfulness training teaches individuals to notice urges and impulses without automatically acting on them, a skill that's directly relevant to managing screen time impulses. It also helps develop awareness of how different activities affect mood and energy levels, which can support better decision making about when and how to engage with digital media. The research shows that mindfulness interventions work by increasing activity in prefrontal brain areas responsible for attention and impulse control, while reducing activity in areas associated with automatic, habitual responses. This neurological pattern directly addresses some of the core deficits that make ADHD individuals vulnerable to problematic screen use. Family-based mindfulness interventions appear to be particularly effective, helping both parents and children develop better awareness and regulation skills. When families practice mindfulness together, it can improve communication and reduce the conflicts around screen time that often escalate problematic use. The research on outdoor exposure and nature-based activities provides another important piece of the screen time puzzle. Structured outdoor play and nature exposure provide measurable improvements in focus, mood, and hyperactivity that can serve as both alternatives to screen time and supports for better self regulation when screen time does occur. Even brief nature experiences can enhance attention and reduce stress in ways that support better self regulation throughout the day. A 20-minute walk in a park has been shown to improve concentration in children with ADHD with effect sizes comparable to some medications. Regular access to green spaces is associated with milder ADHD symptoms overall. This creates an interesting framework for thinking about screen time management. Rather than focusing solely on restriction, families might benefit from ensuring adequate exposure to activities that strengthen ADHD affected brain networks. Physical activity, nature exposure, mindfulness practice, and face to face social interaction. When these foundational activities are in place, moderate screen use may be less problematic. Non-digital cognitive training emerges as a particularly promising alternative to screen-based activities. Board games, puzzles, music practice, and other hands-on activities that challenge executive functions can provide many of the cognitive benefits that digital brain training programs promise, often with better transfer to real-world skills. The research consistently shows that non digital cognitive training interventions are effective and often provide broader, more transferable improvements in executive functions compared to screen based alternatives. Structured, engaging real world activities, especially when supported by adults, appear particularly beneficial for developing executive function skills. Board games, for example, can exercise working memory, cognitive flexibility, and sustained attention while providing the social interaction and immediate feedback that ADHD brains crave. Music practice requires sustained attention, impulse control, and the ability to monitor and adjust performance in real time. Puzzles and building activities challenge spatial reasoning and planning skills. These activities engage the same cognitive systems that digital games target, but they do so in ways that translate more directly to real world skills. A child who learns to sustain attention during a challenging board game is practicing skills that transfer to homework and classroom learning. Someone who develops impulse control through martial arts practice is building capacity that applies to social situations and academic tasks. The research suggests that non digital activities may provide better transfer, partly because they don't create the same contrast effect that highly stimulating digital activities can produce. When children become accustomed to the rapid rewards and intense stimulation of video games, other activities can feel boring or unstimulating by comparison. Non digital activities that are engaging but don't overstimulate can help maintain sensitivity to more subtle forms of reward and satisfaction. Understanding individual differences becomes crucial when applying this research. Not all young people with ADHD respond to screen time in the same way. Some may be more vulnerable to problematic use, while others may be able to engage with digital media without significant symptom worsening. Factors like ADHD subtype, comorbid conditions, family environment, and individual temperament all influence how screen time affects specific individuals. Children with predominantly hyperactive impulsive ADHD may be more vulnerable to the impulsivity driving effects of screen time, while those with predominantly inattentive presentations might be more affected by the attention fragmenting effects of rapid pace content. Young people with anxiety or depression alongside ADHD may be more likely to use screens as emotional regulation tools, making them more vulnerable to problematic use patterns. The research also reveals important developmental considerations. Younger children appear to be more vulnerable to the negative effects of screen time, possibly because their self regulation systems are still developing. Adolescents face additional challenges because their reward systems are naturally more sensitive during this developmental period, potentially making them more susceptible to the addictive qualities of digital media. However, adolescents also have more developed cognitive abilities that can support better self regulation if properly nurtured. Teaching teenagers about the neuroscience of screen time effects and involving them in creating their own management strategies often works better than imposing external restrictions. The goal isn't to eliminate technology from young people's lives. That's neither realistic nor necessarily beneficial in our digital world. Instead, the research points toward developing a more sophisticated understanding of how different types of digital engagement affect ADHD symptoms and using this knowledge to make strategic choices. This might involve scheduling recreational screen time for periods when it's less likely to interfere with sleep or other important activities. It could mean prioritizing interactive, educational, or creative uses of technology over passive consumption. It might involve establishing clear boundaries around certain types of content or platforms that seem particularly problematic for individual children. The research suggests that the most effective approaches combine several strategies: maintaining adequate physical activity and outdoor exposure, prioritizing sleep hygiene, developing mindfulness and self regulation skills, ensuring positive family relationships, and making strategic choices about when, how, and what type of screen content to engage with. For families navigating these challenges, the research suggests that success comes from understanding the specific ways that different types of screen time affect their individual children, establishing clear and consistent boundaries based on evidence rather than arbitrary rules, and ensuring that digital engagement occurs within the context of a lifestyle that supports overall brain health and development. The evidence is clear that certain types of screen use can exacerbate ADHD symptoms, particularly when they involve passive consumption of fast paced, violent, or highly stimulating content for extended periods. The impulsivity pathway explains why this happens. These activities train the brain to expect immediate gratification and constant stimulation, making it harder to tolerate the delays and sustained effort required for focused attention and behavioral control. However, the research also reveals that strategic, mindful use of technology, particularly educational or interactive content used for limited durations, can be part of a healthy lifestyle for young people with ADHD. The key is understanding that not all screen time is created equal and that context, content, and timing matter enormously. The most concerning finding may be the reciprocal relationship where young people with ADHD are more vulnerable to problematic screen use, which then worsens their symptoms. This means that those who are most at risk for negative effects are also most likely to develop problematic use patterns, creating cycles that can be difficult to break without understanding and support. Breaking these cycles requires a comprehensive approach that addresses not just screen time itself, but the underlying needs and vulnerabilities that make problematic use more likely. This includes ensuring adequate sleep, physical activity, and positive social connections, developing emotional regulation and impulse control skills, and creating family environments that support healthy choices without constant conflict. The research points toward hope rather than despair. While digital media can exacerbate ADHD symptoms when used problematically, the same technology can support learning, creativity, and connection when used strategically. Understanding the science helps families move beyond fear based reactions toward informed choices that honor both the realities of our digital world and the specific needs of young people whose brains work differently. This isn't about perfection or strict adherence to arbitrary rules. It's about understanding the science well enough to make choices that support long term well being while acknowledging that technology, used wisely, can be a valuable tool rather than just a threat. The goal is helping young people with ADHD develop the self awareness and regulation skills they need to navigate our digital world successfully throughout their lives. Thank you for joining me in exploring this complex and crucial topic. Understanding how screen time affects ADHD symptoms is essential for helping young people develop healthy relationships with technology that support rather than undermine their unique neurological gifts. The research provides clear guidance for making informed choices that can help young people with ADHD thrive in our increasingly digital world.